Welcome back to the Celtic State of Mind Matchday Bulletin. I'm Paul John Dykes. Today I'm joined by Chris McElwain, and we're here, of course, to cover the Scottish Cup final. It's a 1 hour special. This is your pre-match. This is Acsom, and we've got the teams in. We're obviously going to, go through each part of this game, Chris, bit by bit, and we will try and dismantle every single aspect of this game, as I'm sure many others have done before. And will do since. I don't know how you're feeling. We'll get to all that. We're going to speak even about the lineups first and foremost, the big lineups, and obviously we will tap into everything else, including the gaffers, the pre-match preparations, and what's been happening in Glasgow already. I'm pretty sure you will have seen some of the footage filtering its way into the social media channels. Let's start off with Celtic then. I mean, yesterday and the day before, in fact, all week, we were talking about the predicted 11, and I don't think there's any surprise in there. This is the 11 who started against Rangers last time round. It'll be a familiar 4-3-3. It's Hart, Johnston, Taylor, McGregor, Carter-Vickers, Scales, O'Reilly, Hatate, Kyogo, Forrest, and Maeda. McGregor is not playing centre-half, of course. It's what we predicted, Chris, and I think it is the perfect lineup for a game against Rangers.
Yeah, I think it was one of the easiest lineups that we've had to predict throughout the season, because one of the things we've spoken about is the momentum that we've had in recent weeks and recent games, and I think a large part of that is down to the continuity we've had in selection and having certain players back, fit and available. Also the resurgence of one James Forrest as well. So yeah, for me, the team absolutely picks itself today. I think what's also encouraging is the strength of depth on the bench as well. I know there are players there who've had kind of ups and downs so far this season, but I still think there are players on that bench who can come in and make an impact. I think one that stands out is Adam Ida on there. What a great option to have on the bench. He's been on form, whether being called upon from the start or coming in the bench. So brilliant option for the manager should he need it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great option for anyone who's not seen the substitute bench. It is Louis Palma, it's Adam Ida, Nicholas Kuhn, Mike Nawrocki, Tomoki Awata, Paulo Bernardo, Scott Bain, Anthony Ralston, and also Stephen Welsh, who obviously got injured on Trophy Day, but he is fit and he's on the bench should he be required. The Celtic side, we will go into it in more detail. We'll also tell you who is lining up for Rangers. So it's Butland, Tavernier, Balogun, Davis, Ridvan, Diamonde, Riscan, Cantwell, Sterling, Silva and Dessers. That's a familiar lineup from Rangers. Now, we are going to be talking about the head-to-heads, the Gaffer versus Gaffer battle. But let's have a wee talk about the lead up to this game, because for some time now, the Green Brigade have made it pretty clear that there was going to be a gathering at the Glasgow Green. There was going to be the march up to the stadium. Everything's organised as usual with the Green Brigade guys, brilliant at organising everything from tifos to protests and everything else. And I think we've all seen the footage of the fans marching through an area of Glasgow that was swamped with Celtic supporters just last week after the Trophy Day, the celebrations. What is the point in doing it? Are you marking your territory? Are you trying to say that Glasgow is ours and all that kind of stuff? Well, they knew the Green Brigade and Ultras weren't going to be there, Chris. So what you're faced with is kind of middle-aged and older guys, daughters, young kids, etc., in and around the area, being frightened out their life, being frightened out their skin. Any need for it?
No, and there never is, to be fair. I mean, watching the socials today, and there's lots of footage out there, and there's two very clear contrasts in terms of the footage. On one hand, you've got groups of green and white supporters, not about socialising, not really doing too much other than just gathering, bit of conversation, nice, colourful, looks very peaceful, right? And then you've got the absolute contrast where you've got what can only be described as a bunch of S&M Smurfs wearing matching hoodies that have obviously been issued. Hoods up, faces covered. Now, I'm sorry, but I've been outside. The weather's pretty warm. There's no need for hoodies, hoods up, or faces covered, other than trying to hide your identity. Marching, singing some of their favourite melodies, which, as we usually know, involves a certain demographic's blood. with the police shuffling them along. And then the footage escalates and you see them gathering outside a well-known Celtic pub, intimidating the patrons, looking to cause a bit of damage. You see them not marching, but actually starting to sprint, starting to charge. I've seen some reports of people with no affiliation to either team talking about how intimidating that is down certain parts of Glasgow. For me, there's no need for it. I don't know what they're trying to do. Is it chest thumping? Is it, as you say, marking the territory in the most basest way possible? Not for me. Look, it's a game of football. I get the rivalry. I get the banter. I've never got any issue with that. I don't care what people, as much as I don't like it, if people restrict their virility and their bile to the inside of a stadium or across 90 minutes, then look, there's almost a level of acceptance that's going to happen. But see out in the street, you're not necessarily there amongst supporters. You're right. You're talking about families. You're talking about businessmen. Business people. You're talking about residents. It's a disgrace. It's a disgrace. And look, ultimately what they're trying to do is they're trying to intimidate, they're trying to antagonise, and they're trying to get a reaction. As much as I've got great faith in our fans, and I think we're the best fans in the world, you start throwing alcohol into the mix, you throw a supercharged, emotionally draining football match into the mix, and there's a good chance that they'll get what they want, which is that something will kick off. And that does nobody any favours, doesn't do our city any favours, doesn't do our country any favours, doesn't do either club any favours, and certainly doesn't do anyone's health or safety, which is of paramount importance, any favours. So I genuinely hope and pray that we don't give these morons any credibility or legitimacy at all. Just let them go and back under their rocks. And please, from our side, please don't react. Go and enjoy the game, enjoy the atmosphere, and for the love of God, stay safe.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing for me, before we get back to the football, the important bit, Chris, is that the police presence, the fact that they were marching almost in sync with the groups, would suggest to me that the police had intelligence that a certain group of fans were going to meet up in a certain space and then make their way on a route. I'm not saying it was a planned manoeuvre or march or anything that you need to get planning permission for through the councils and everything else, but intelligence would have suggested that the police knew what was going on, hence the police presence. It's not like they're just being phoned 999 and they've all appeared, like that. So I think that that needs to be questioned due to the nature of the hate crime bill. I mean, there's a group of people talking about certain aspects of society, and it is not acceptable. And that's my criticism. There you go. I'm off my soapbox now. I'm going to be talking about Celtic, and I want to work my way through this team. Then we'll get on to Brendan. I think Brendan has played a blinder most of this year, most of 2024. I think the way that he's turned it around, the way that he's controlled, Chris. This word that I keep getting pelters for using, he's controlled the narrative. I was brought up on tales and stories of Jock Stein putting Celtic on the back page of the Scottish sports press, which back then was a hugely influential market. If something was printed in a newspaper, it sold in huge volumes. People believed what they read back in those days, Chris. Talking about fake news and Pravda and propaganda and all that kind of stuff. People actually believed whatever was printed in these titles and whatever they heard on the news. I think we're now awoke in society in terms of the fact that we question things. We don't just take it as printed or as said. But Jockstein got us back on the back pages, and I'm not quite going to be putting Brendan Rodgers on the same level as the great man himself. But one thing he has done, I think, he's controlled the narrative, because there was a few, I think, wobbles near the beginning of the season where there was a bit of blame creeping into his post-match pressers and all that, Chris, where he's talking about the quality not being there and all this. But there came a point where there was a galvanisation, and I think the fans got caught up in it as well, mate. I think that we all came together. I've said, I might be wrong, I said it felt like it might have been Tynecastle. The game we got beat, the last time we got beat, there seemed to be, right, it's us and them, but let's make sure it's us as a support, as a team, as a management, the whole thing, and we're much stronger that way. And I feel that Brendan has been the heartbeat of that, the way he's communicated, the way that he's been reacting to things. And obviously, even things like bringing Jamesy back into the team. it was a massive sign that he's looking at that group and saying, I need my Warriors here. And he's had them up to this point. He's absolutely had the result that he was looking for.
Yeah, I mean, look, when he first came in, as we've spoken about, there was a lot of resistance to him. And we've got to remember, look, Brendan Rodgers, for all his confidence and self-assurance, he's human. And in every walk of life, things will affect you differently. And we don't know what pressures he was under behind the scenes, but I don't think you can take on a job like the Celtic manager's job without recognising the pressure and the level of expectation, not just from within the club, but actually from the fan base as well. And and we've scrutinised them at various points this season for various reasons: team selection, tactics, and of course results. But I think you're right. I think there was a little bit of, certainly what I would have called, elements of defiance and elements of almost that sage mentality at some point.
Like it, yeah.
And I felt as though there was an element of maybe being like backed into a corner, for example, in earlier parts of the season. What I've seen recently, and it was never more exemplified than I think his pre-match presser just the other day, which I listened to again this morning. And something that came across there, actually, and I'm going to use the word that you've used, it was control. Mm-hmm. He was very, very controlled, very measured. I think he spoke very, very well. And he spoke, to me, it came across as someone who is very much comfortable. He's in a comfortable place at the moment in terms of the job he's doing, what he's got available to him, his team selection and results. And there seems to, almost over the course of a season, there seems to become more of a maturity about Brendan Rodgers and the way that he's actually navigating things like the media coverage, press conferences, interviews, the way he's coming across. I thought, actually, when you were talking to JP on Thursday, mm-hmm. I loved that story about JP was leaving, JP's firm was leaving the press event and turned around and Brendan just clocks him and decides to take the point of coming over. And I know we've spoken about, is that a little bit cynical view? Is that Brendan doing brand Brendan and trying to rebuild his reputation? No, look, maybe we've got to give him a bit more credit and say, actually, maybe he just saw two guys there, proper fans, wanted to go and say hi, maybe get an element of connection with some of the fans. And I think, I don't care what his reasons for doing that are. I think that's a good thing. I just think Brendan Rodgers, for me at the moment, looks like he is happy where he is. Yeah. He looks like he is in control of what he's doing. And he looks to me like a man that's going to be here next May, not just this May at the moment. So, yeah, fingers crossed that we get over the line today and he starts to build on some of the credit that he's regained.
Yeah, I think he has got credit in the bank. What I want to talk about here, I watched an interview just last week, I think it was, and Rio Ferdinand was talking about the departure of Alex Ferguson from Manchester United in relation to where they are now as a football club, Chris, and the fact that it was almost an impossible task to take over a manager like Fergie. He told this story, and I'm not comparing Ferguson or the manager I'm about to talk about with anybody at Celtic. It's a situation and the scenario of having a manager who's so imposing, successful, a huge character, right, with a huge personality, and how difficult they are to replace. And he was talking about being on a pre-season, the first pre-season after Fergie had left Manchester United, and David Moyes looked absolutely dishevelled and he was sitting there knackered, and he's turned round to Rio and said, "It's a big club, this, eh?" He was like done in. And Ferdinand now tells a story, right? Ferdinand obviously doesn't work on club crests and all that kind of stuff for the camera, but Ferdinand told the story as if to say, wow, I realised at that moment this job was too big for that manager. That's all with hindsight, right? It's all with hindsight. And he's maybe looking too much into it. But the point remains, if you're a manager at a football club for that length of time or with a huge amount of success, and I think Liverpool are going to have a situation like this very soon when Klopp leaves.
Possibly, yeah.
We don't really tap into that scenario, right? And how it was taken over from a guy who had come in to Celtic, won 5 trophies out of 6, right? This guy who was absolutely lambasted in the press and in some areas of the Celtic support. That man being, of course, Ange Postecoglou with a huge profile, huge personality, right? a guy not to be crossed, and we all bought into Ange, right? We all bought into it, Chris. How do you come in and actually take over that job? And I don't think Brendan's been given credit, because you look at Brendan Rodgers and go, wait a minute, he's a strong guy himself. He's an experienced manager. He's been through this before at Celtic. But I don't think, and as I've already said, I'm not comparing Ange to Fergie. I'm just, the scenarios of taking over from such a successful manager who's a huge character at the football club and who's so loved by the fans, that's important. I don't know, do we give Brendan enough credit for the fact that he did it? Yeah, it was rocky to begin with, but should we have been surprised, really?
I think it sometimes comes down to the individual as well, and the type of character they have. I don't think at any point in his career, certainly for the period I've followed him, right back from when he was at Liverpool, he's ever been a guy who's lacked self-belief or self-confidence. He always puts that across. He doesn't put it across necessarily arrogantly, but I think he puts that across in terms of how he conducts himself, and you know, you don't see him flustered too often. I know it's happened on occasion, and maybe more recently at Leicester, but you never really see him too flustered. And it also reminds me of the fact, you know, Gordon Strachan, for example, another big character, but he was coming in off the heels of Martin O'Neill, you know, one of our most successful managers in modern times. And that must have been the equivalent of someone, say, coming in to replace, not perhaps to the same extent, but to replace someone like Alex Ferguson at Man United. It must have been, you know, a kind of similar level of expectation, I think, and anticipation. And probably a healthy dose of doubt as well, I would think, from certain channels. And ultimately, Gordon Strachan now is you know, very, very well thought of in Celtic circles, and he did bring success not only domestically but in Europe. And I think Brendan, you know, when he came here first time around, you know, he had that profile of almost being the manager to take Liverpool back to the summit of English football again. He was so close, you know. We all remember that Steven Gerrard slip. So he had a bit of a profile coming in, but he wasn't what you'd call, you know, a hugely successful manager in terms of, you know, trophies or competition wins. But he did so well in that first season, you know, invincible season, the trebles, you know, some of the football, the signings that we made. So he had a bit of a legacy already. If he'd never came back, I think over time, despite the manner of him leaving the first time, I think his legacy would have been repaired, and people would look on those times as fondly as we probably should. But coming back in after, you know, a successful manager and a manager who, I think I said before, had come in with really no expectations because we didn't know enough about him, in Ange, but who delivered, you know, above and beyond what we maybe would have expected or could even hope for over those 2 seasons. And then suddenly you bring back a guy who, you know, just the proximity to the point where he left was still pretty raw. You know, it wasn't that long, so still a lot of raw feeling. And we see that even with some of the guys in the in the Acsom group. You know, Kev's a great example. But even Kev's starting to now soften his stance on Rodgers based on what Rodgers is doing on the pitch, how he's conducting himself, this kind of slightly fighting mentality, the way he seems to be outmanoeuvring, you know, Philippe Clement on the other side of the city. So. Yeah, I think Brendan has done a huge amount of work, not only to bring the title home this season and get us to the position where we're now hopefully playing for you know, the cup today and going on to win it, but I think just for the way that he's changed perception. He's changed so many people's perception this season. It's taken a bit of time, and not everybody's still to this point bought into it, but he has changed perception. I think he deserves credit for that.
Yeah, without a doubt. Anyone who's still harbouring some of those emotions, maybe a double will help them get over it, Chris. It's a wee while down the line. And it's good to hear Brendan Rodgers talking about everything that you've just mentioned there. Big shout out to Ian Roy for supporting the channel. Ian, let us know how you're going to enjoy the game today over in Florida. A must win, you say today. Need to keep them down. I want to talk about that, right? And I'm all for just, you know, concentrating on what you're doing, making sure you're the best version of the football team, the organisation, the coaching staff, everything. The best version you can possibly be. And when you're at a club like Celtic, I think that goes into every single press conference, every public appearance, every time your car stops outside Lennoxtown to meet a wee kid with a jersey to get signed. Every single thing you do, live and breathe Celtic. Look at after it from your own perspective and with your own set of standards. Don't worry about anybody else. I totally believe in that. We're in an environment here within Scotland and within Scottish football where The other side, the rivals, or everything is always consistently spoken about. Even when you are asked yourself as a Celtic fan by any other broadcaster or platform, they somehow manage to build in questions in relation to how well Rangers are doing. It's the way of the world in Scottish football. So I think that's a very difficult thing for Brendan to have done, but he seems to have done it. But that point there about burying them, right? This is football. Right, we're football fans, Chris, right? It's not like this is not politics. I know politics comes into football, whereby it's like, may the best man win. No, I'm the same. I want to absolutely hammer them every time we take the field. Every single trophy that's up for grabs, I want Celtic to win it. I don't care if people think it's being triumphant or being, entitled. I've heard all these words being used, Chris. It's not that at all. I just want Celtic to be the absolute peak of their powers. And if they are, no one can live with us. We showed it last season. We've showed it at points this season. When we look after our own backyard and we do everything we can do and do it to the best of our ability, no one in this country can live with us. Europe's a different matter entirely. And we'll probably talk about that throughout the pre-season. But what Ian says there, it brings to mind something I've been talking about in the group chat. And I know that people say, why are you getting into this counting trophies carry on? I'm not getting into it, but you know what? You've got a right to reply. And when these things are constantly drummed into you, that, it's a massive big media focus, as it was when a certain team were apparently going for 55 trophies. At that point, I could not have told you, the cumulative efforts of Rangers and their predecessors and how many trophies or leagues they had won. But they've made it a thing. And I think, Chris, the reason they've made it a thing is so that if they accumulate both sets of honours, they can say they're one and the same. Therefore, we are one and the same entity. I think that's where it comes from. That's my view on it, right? So now, Rangers have won, apparently, 118 trophies. Okay, one European trophy, 117 domestic. That's what they've won. And it's something that we've been told about and it's been spoken about and everything else, the 54, the 55, all this kind of stuff. Going into today's game, I just took upon myself to have a wee count myself of how many Celtic have won during their unbroken history. And it's 117. So we're only one behind. So when Ian says that, I think about, all right, what's the impact? What happens if we win this, right? So we would go level on the accumulative trophies of Rangers and their predecessors. The Derby record, again, using the same legend there, Celtic have won 168. And both Rangers teams together have won 169. So one more win and we go level on that. What else will they go on about once we have matched all these? Are they going to say, but we've won more League Cups? Are they going to say to us, Chris, but you know what? We should really legitimise all the unofficial wartime games and then we'll have won more trophies. Is that where we're going to go with this? Because it will blow it out the water. And it's just another little part of the drama today. It's like, wait a minute, if we win this game, we're level on these massive figures you keep banging on about. What are you going to talk about next season? I think there is a bit of that. And by the way, there's a bit of banter as well. Let's be honest, right?
Part of me wonders if there's about 3 or 4 hours from now, there'll be a Rangers statistician. It's easy for me to say statistician. Looking out the window at Ibrox across the field down there in Paisley and saying, see, groups of kids, one of them wearing a Rangers top, one of them wearing a Celtic top, and probably shout over, what's the score, big man? Can we add another one to the list? That's look, it's banter, right? It's not warfare, it's not politics, it's football. It's a game, right? It's a game we absolutely love, we adore it, we love our club, we get right behind it, we get passionate about it, but it's a game, right? And ultimately, in the grand scheme of things across the world, it means very, very little. But in terms of worldwide impact, that kind of thing. But actually, as a supporter, it can become people's whole life. And actually, we see that with even, I mentioned one fella that reached out yesterday, Martin, and told us of the effect even, our podcast is had in helping his recovery. And you hear lots of stories about that, about how Celtic is something that people can latch onto in hard times. And look, there'll be Rangers fans and fans of all clubs that have similar feelings. And, you just have to go on YouTube or go into various socials to see examples of that. So I love all the positivity that football brings, and I love all the positivity that our club brings. But you know what? Part of it is the banter. It's the one-upmanship. It's the gamesmanship. It's the being able to go into work and slag your pals off because they support the other team. You know, one of my best mates is a Rangers fan, and you know we do. We slag each other off, but we're pals, right? We're pals, and we can do that, and we get it. Where I think it gets a wee bit strange is when you're getting official club statements coming out saying we've won X amount of trophies. It's kind of a bit like my dad's bigger than your dad attitude from certain clubs. And I would rather the clubs kind of stayed out of it. I just think it's very much the realm and the domain of the supporters. But do you know what? Part of being a Celtic fan is, as you say, I want to win everything. I'm greedy. I don't think we've got the God-given right to go and beat everybody or win everything. Me and you have both lived through eras where we didn't win much. We had to watch our greatest rivals go and win almost every trophy going, even when we thought we had the better team and played the better football. You know, so when we win something now, and I don't care what numbers associated to it, when we win something now, I appreciate it. I do. I appreciate it as a fan. And I would say to any supporters that are there today who've maybe never seen anything pre-Martin O'Neill era, for example, from a Celtics fan's perspective, or never lived through that. I would say if hopefully we go and beat them today, appreciate it. Appreciate what you're seeing. Appreciate the manager. Appreciate the players. Appreciate the team and the club and the trophy and everything that comes with it. But appreciate the right to lord it over your rivals as well. It's part of what it's about. It's part of why we love it. Part of why we enjoy it. As I say, when you're looking at events today in the city centre and you're worried about what has happened, what might happen post game, it should never ever go to that level. It just shouldn't. But us saying, well, you put the record out there, we're about to match it. Over you guys. What's your next move?
The big thing, as I say, the next move will obviously be around trying to get titles that weren't theirs and all this kind of stuff, Chris. I'm pretty sure. But what I would say on that is, we all know that if you've ever worked for a business or a company that has to rebrand, it's quite it's a strenuous and financially challenging thing to do, and they're going to have to go around wherever it says the world's most successful club, and they're going to have to try and find joint somewhere, get loads of stickers or Tipex. It's got to be the joint most successful football club. So good luck to them. I'm also looking at Dumbarton's honours. Dumbarton Football Club, their honours, they won a league back in 1890-91 apparently, but so did Rangers. So is it 54 and a half? I don't know. There you go. Michael says the same. 54 and 1 tied. Right, we're winding any of the trolls up who might have slipped through the cracks and are in the comments section. Everybody at the game, everybody travelling up through the Celtic bars, everybody in Glasgow, hopefully you are all safe and well. Jungle Lion is flying the flag for Acsom in Fuerteventura today. I'll tell you something, JL, you get around, son.
I was going to say,
around. You must have some tan. You must have some tan. But moving on from that, he answers the question, because we were saying, what are you going to have left? And what he says is, the only thing they'll have left is this shenanigans. Well, there seems to be a massive focus, obviously, on, and this is the thing with ultras. I want to put this out here, right? Back in the day, there was a football issue with hooliganism. And it was part of the casual movement back in the day. That's separate from the ultra movement. It's not one and the same. And I know that the authorities and the police authorities, that is, and the football authorities and local councils and representatives all want it to be one and the same. They want to get all the ultras and stick them in the same box as hooligans and troublemakers and casuals. I'm sorry, I've seen the rise of the ultra movement in Scottish football, and they're not the same. They absolutely are not the same. The only similarity for me is they're organised, right? So you've got the casual movement, they guys were organised, and it was guys. I mean, I'm not aware of any girls who were involved in the casual movement, right? It wasn't a slight on anybody. The ultra movement is completely different. The ultra movement, I think it takes its roots from the German ultra movement, but obviously there's ultras all over. But I know Celtic and our ultra groups have taken great inspiration and influence from the German ultra movement, whereby it's about adding colour, it's about adding noise, and it's doing it in an organised way. Whereas before, you would go to a game at Celtic Park and it was, it just all happened organically, didn't it? A chant and all this kind of stuff. The only thing I seen that I think was organised was when all the guys turned up with the sack the board back the team jerseys. Everybody had one letter on a white jersey. So they bring that, they bring the colour, they bring the tifos, they bring the sound, they've brought, because this is Celtic, there's a political edge to the football club. They've brought that. They've brought fundraising. They've brought a lot of good to this football club. So what we've seen today, the footage that most of us will have seen involving what I can only presume is the Union Bears, I think it's them, marching through that area of Glasgow for no other reason than to antagonise and intimidate and all this kind of stuff. That's no the Green Brigades. That's no the Green Brigade's mantra. It's completely different, right? And it's not about just saying, we don't have an issue, they do, etc., etc. It's not about that. All I can say here is the ultra movement is something that I've studied, I've researched, I've been a massive fan of it because I think it brings so much to the game of football. It also brings a new generation of fans with a purpose into football stadiums, right? And it really bugs me when you see a group of ultras taking it back to those scenes that we used to see back in the 80s, where it was hooliganism and it was fighting and it was organised fights and all this kind of stuff. Because for me, that's not the ultra movement. Certainly not from a Celtic perspective, Chris.
No, I'd agree. I mean, I think I first heard the term ultras back in the old Channel 4 days of Football Italia. I remember the old James Richardson show. And you'd hear stories of the Italian team ultras going to the training grounds to berate the players. And I think even one point there was a group of ultras, it was one of the Milan teams, I think it was Inter Milan, where they actually, apologies if I've got this wrong, but I think it was a motorised scooter actually launched, a Vespa launched from the upper stands down to the front row fans below. So
what a waste.
Absolutely. So that was my, I think that was my earliest memory of the term ultras, and I never ever associated it to any of the teams in Scotland, and certainly not Celtic. Obviously, you grew up with stories of the Jungle, the Green Brigade, the supporters associations and supporters clubs, etc. And I've never ever associated them, as you say, with violence, with organised violence, with the Millwall and the Firm days and all that sort of stuff. So never really ever associated it or lined it with that. Look, I don't like anything that brings our club into disrepute or gives it a bad name. And I know that sometimes there's an association with fan movements and can do that. So when I look at the Green Brigade, for example, the only entity I see the Green Brigade being antagonistic to is our board when they don't think they're doing what they should be doing for the football clubs. That's frankly it. And to be honest, more often than not, as much as I love my club, I think they've got a great point. I've also never heard the Green Brigade refer to themselves as more important or more valuable to the club than any other supporter. I don't think they've got that level of arrogance. I really don't. I think the Green Brigade play a part. I think every supporter that goes to the club week in, week out, goes to our stadium, goes to away games, I think they play their part. I think they're equally as valuable as any other. But what I do like about the organisation level behind groups like the Green Brigade is they do bring something quite unique to the ground and the atmosphere. They do bring an additional level of singing, and it can be infectious. I've been at games where it just gets spread from that corner, and the rest of the fans get involved. And it really, sometimes you hear applause, sometimes you get involved, that kind of thing. So I do think that there's a place for those die-hard supporter groups, whether you want to term them the ultras or not. But absolutely, I completely agree with you. That should never cross the line into what is essentially hooliganism, intimidation, fear, organised fights, organised marches. Those are not representing any club. They're not representing any element of football. That's a group of guys that want to go out and cause trouble through hatred, through bigotry, through just a generational inherited dislike and hatred, completely irrational, because it festers, and it festers from old guys in bowler hats down to young guys who've never been taught any better. And it's something I would love to see eradicated from football. But die-hard supporters, die-hard fans, organised groups like the Green Brigade who really try and bring an extra element to Celtic Park. And, you hear people, away fans, visiting fans coming from all parts of Europe coming and talking about how wonderful the atmosphere at Celtic Park is. You hear players like Lionel Messi and Ronaldinho and Thierry Henry and others saying it's the best atmosphere they've played in. That can only be a good thing for the club, right? There's no negative there. So, yeah, it's really important we disassociate the actions we disassociate the groups based on their actions, I should say. Hooligans, they perform actions based on intimidation, fear, violence, etc. Ultras support their club, try to represent the club in the right way, try to add to the atmosphere, try and boost their team on the park, and also try and represent the interests of supporters. So that there are two distinct differences there in terms of how they act. And look, I'll say it here, just for objectivity, I will say it. Every team, including ours, has got its fair share of mole runs, right? We do. We always acknowledge it, and we should call it out when it happens, base it on the actions of the individual and hold them accountable. But when you see scenes like today, so organised, so blatantly coordinated, all dressed up in the same hoodies with the faces covered, there is one objective there and one only, and that's to put fear, intimidation, and antagonise the opposite set of fans there. There's the only purpose behind it.
No, you're right. I totally agree with that. Ian Roy is also right. Attacking Gracies. I'm in the US. Are they causing trouble already? Yes. We've seen some, these things are shared rapidly, aren't they, throughout the old WhatsApp groups and on social media. James Pearson, 88. Great to see you, James. Simply said, today is the day. 3-1 for me. Carter Vickers, Kyogo and Hatate. I've got a feeling Rio will be pivotal to today's proceedings. Hail, hail, lads. Now, we're going to run through the team individually, and seeing how, as you brought up Rio Hatate, I want to start off with Rio. Wingnut was commenting in the comment section. Wingnut obviously got up this morning, Chris, and he was full of the battle fever, right? And he's thinking, when does Acsom start? So I can go in and start slagging off Celtic fans. Bye, Wingnut. I'm hoping you had a great time. Go and enjoy the game with fellow-minded football fans. Yes, here we go. It's the 25th of May as well. We've got to speak about that tremendous day in the calendar for Celtic. But I want to start off by talking about Rio, because when Brendan Rodgers came in, Rio Hatate was one of three players that I thought were going to be escalated. Their performances were going to improve. They were going to be taken under the wing of Brendan Rodgers, who loves to develop players. He loves to help players to progress. The three guys that I mentioned at the beginning of the season were Lila Bada, Rio Hatate, Matt O'Reilly. When you look at the, Matt was always a great player, right? But this has been a vintage season from Matt O'Reilly. You look at his goals and his assists from midfield, Chris, absolutely astonishing. And much improved from last season as well. I'm not going to, this is a no transfer speculation zone today. I am not talking about the likelihood of any player leaving Celtic Football Club this summer. But Matt O'Reilly has stepped it up. Now, you've got to give credit to the player, first and foremost, Chris. It's not down to the gaffer. He done very, very well under Ange. I think he's played better under Brendan. I'm not giving all the credit to Brendan Rodgers. You'd need to ask Matt how much of a part the gaffers played in this. Rio Labada, we know it didn't work out this season for me. I'm gutted at that. That was a guy who had more development in him. In the hoops, it didn't happen. We all know why, and he's moved on. We wish him the best. But Rio Hatate is a guy who, for no reason other than injury, has not had a great season. He's been in and out of the side because of the injuries, and it's a case of he comes into the side, Chris, and he needs a few games to get up to that peak Rio. And I don't think he's there yet. And I've been saying this. I think we've seen moments. I don't think he's there yet. But I'm looking at today, and I would not put it past him to be the star man today, because he's got it in his locker, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think potentially you could be right. There could be, it's one great thing about this side is there's so many who could step up and be a match winner or a hero today. And I wouldn't mind if more than one of them took that mantle today, and we had a few heroes on the park. But I think you're right on Rio. Rio last season, for me, he was a player who showed that little bit of innovation. He showed that little bit of risk taking on the park. He wasn't always going for the safe pass. He was always looking to try something that was a little bit different. And when it comes off, it looks magnificent. It's like a Pirlo-esque pass, or a brilliant bit of movement that just unlocks the fences, or even his shots from outside the box. So he was a player that I think conjured up some really big moments. But he's also a player that when it doesn't go quite right, there can be consequences. It can lead to a bad counter, or we lose possession, or something like that. So he kind of, but he takes a risk to open himself up to the highest level of praise or the worst level of criticism. And I think you're right. At the start of the season, I was a bit worried about how Hatate, as interestingly enough, as well as Kyogo and Maeda and our Japanese and Asian contingent, how were they going to feel when the manager that they had the real link to and the association with, and Ange had left, would they be able to take to Brendan Rodgers? Would Brendan Rodgers see the value that Ange did, and in fact all of us supporters saw in those players? And would he actually then be able to, foster even more improvements in their game? I think with O'Reilly, just because you touched on him earlier as well, with O'Reilly, he looks like a player now that rather than being part of a collective strong midfield, he's standing out in that midfield. He's taken ownership of the role that he plays. He is, driving the team forward. He's now really taking his game to another level. It's almost like the shackles have been taken off Matt O'Reilly a little bit. And, you'd hope that the Brendan Rodgers has enabled him to do that and given him the incentive to go and do that. I think if Hatate had stayed fit at the start of the season, he may well have followed the same path. And I think, we suffered at the early part of the season without having Hatate there. We didn't have that settled midfield, which we were so used to having. And so O'Reilly stepped up. That was great. But I think also the balance of the midfield, unfortunately, suffered a little bit. So while O'Reilly was performing, I think, very well individually, I think the balance of the midfield suffered. I think Callum McGregor had to take on a lot more responsibility, and we know Calmac. I mean, he'll run until he can't run anymore. He'll play every game. He'll go out there with a broken leg if he has to. It seems a large part of the time. But he's a great player, a great captain. But he's also only human, right? And he can't carry the can for the whole team, particularly when the chips are down. And we tried home. We toyed with Iwata coming in there. We had Bernardo's come in and played a part, largely European, and a few games more domestically towards the end of the season now. But I think having Hatate, Callum McGregor and Matt O'Reilly now, that's been one of the key reasons why we look so much more balanced, why our performances look so much more assured, why I think we've got a much more fluid style of play now within the centre of that park. Still think the performance levels, as you say, are not where they need to be. I think Hatate's still trying to get up to that level, as you've rightly pointed out. Just makes you wonder what would happen if we keep O'Reilly for another season, we keep Hatate, and we've got Callum McGregor fit. That could be an absolutely solid midfield for the next 2 or 3 years. Like you say, we're going to speculate on transfers, but just the what if.
Yeah, there is always that what if hanging over your head when you're a Celtic supporter and a player of such quality starts to, come to the attention of some of these richer clubs. And I'm always loath to say bigger clubs, the richer clubs who can offer bigger wages and, they normally are part of one of the biggest, let's say, 6 leagues in Europe. So, yeah, it's always something in the back of your mind. But I would love to see the ambition shown by the club to keep a player like him. Last time I think we saw, in terms of recruitment, a level of ambition was when we signed Carter Vickers and Jota in the same window, made the moves permanent. When even on Acsom we were saying, listen, it's very unlikely we're going to get the 2 of them here. Which one would you prefer?
There's one or the other.
And we got to both of them. That wasn't that long ago. So we have shown ambition in the near past, and hopefully we can do that again. Some people think I'm crazy for even suggesting as much. Any Celtic victory will suit Tony Cassidy. Where did Tony say he was? So there we go. He's in Paddy's in Ayanapa. There he is.
I was going to say Tony was saying, he's really sorry, he's not going to go to the game today, and he says, because he's in Ayanapa. I thought, you ain't fooling anybody, Tony.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, David, attacking family pubs is shocking. Yeah, it is absolutely. You go on and ask why I'm not at the game. Were you going to give me your ticket, David? No. All seriousness, the reason I'm not at the game is because I'm here. And if I wasn't here, we wouldn't have 1,000 people watching this live show from Ayanapa, Fuerteventura, Florida, and various other corners of the world, if you're a flat earther. Areas of the world, David. In a situation where we started the match day up, the live match day, during the lockdown, like everybody else with a season ticket, I renewed and have continued to renew. And I've tried to find a way to do this match day in a location closer to Celtic Park. And I've been trying to do that probably for about 18 months to 2 years. And I think I might have a solution. I don't know when it's going to be in place, but I might have a solution where I can actually cover the game, right? And then leave and go to the game. Get somebody else to do the half-time. come back at full time, because I'm not coming back just for 15 minutes. Right. So, yes, I should be able to change that. We're always looking to develop the platform, the channel. And that is part of it, David. And it's in development. Well, I'll keep you updated. But basically, we might have a base nearer to Celtic Park where I can do it. I'm nowhere near Celtic Park as we speak. The next development with a Celtic state of mind, stay tuned. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel, because on Friday of next week, barring disaster, on Friday of next week, our new show will be on the channel. Now, it's not a live stream that you're seeing here with Chris in Glasgow, me and Fife talking to each other and getting you involved. It's a fully produced, multi-camera, in a venue in Glasgow TV show, basically, for an hour. And it's going to be on our channel on every Friday night. I've not decided what time yet, but I didn't want to clash with Corey. But every Friday night, it's going to be on there. We'll be filming that during the week, and it's called "This Is Acsom." And so the tagline is "From Barrafield to the Barrowlands." This is Acsom. We're going to have a number of guests from the world of Celtic. We're going to try and get the biggest and best guests around, and obviously you will have Acsom contributors to join the discussion. It's going to be a different discussion, though, Chris, because we're going to be in the same room across from the table or the bar, depending on how we decide to film this. Whites at the eyes, proper discussion, people butting in, people falling out, all that stuff's going to happen because we're going to be in the same room. Not that it stopped us falling out before, Chris, no, you and I, but we've had a few ding-dongs on Acsom over the years.
I was going to say, that's a terrible thing to say about Kev.
Well, yeah, he's been involved in a few. Kev will be at the game today. Really buzzing about this. It's been in the works for a long time. There's been various reasons why it's not gone live yet, but next week is the week, and we're going to run it every single week. So on a Monday, you'll have your Wander Around Paradise during the season. On a Friday, you'll have This Is Acsom, fully produced content, and every day we will have the live streams, and we'll cover every game. So that's what you're going to get for subscribing for free to the channel. Jimmy McIntyre, thank you for supporting the channel. That helps us massively. Absolutely brilliant of you. Thank you very much. Mick says 100% Paul John all the time, win the lot. Yeah, it's my mentality when it comes to Celtic. I want to give away nothing, absolutely nothing. And I don't subscribe to the fact everybody needs a wee kick of the ball now and again. No. Let's dominate. Let's keep dominating. We spoke about the domination, actually, and you brought up a great example, because I'm talking about examples from down south in Manchester United and Liverpool. How difficult would it have been to take over the managerial job after Martin O'Neill? And we talk about the period of domination on the park starting in 2000 right up to today's date. And the level of domination is incredible when you look at the stats, right? On a European level, people scoff at Celtic and say, oh, we're to blame for coefficients and everything. The first thing I would say on that is we're always playing Europe's elite in the Europe's elite competition, because you're winning the league season on season. So there is that. It's not as if, some people say to us, we're a Europa League club. I don't want to be a Europa League club, because that means you've not won your league. You've got to be a Champions League club, and you've got to improve, even if it's incrementally every single season. But in that period since O'Neill came in, 24 years, we have participated in the group stages of the Champions League on 9 occasions, and we have reached the last 16 3 times. Now, you might look at that and say, well, that's 12 decent seasons, even though last season was disappointing. We're in the groups, right? So there's a level of standard, I guess. So that's 12 out of 24, and that isn't good enough, Chris. But we need to start improving on it bit by bit. Keeping a guy like O'Reilly would be a start. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to do that. But improving on what we've got is going to be absolutely pivotal to that. And this is why I want to talk about the defence, because we know we're going to have to improve on, or replace rather, Joe Hart. His final senior appearance after 20 years as a footballer today. Now, we're all emotional and all that, being Celtic fans, Chris. But there's a time as a footballer where you really need to remove that emotion and focus 100% on the game. Must be difficult, though. After 20 years, this is your last day. This is your swan song. And I'm hoping it goes without any blips.
Yeah, that's what you hope's in the script, right? One of the best things about football is the romanticism, right? And there's something romantic about a guy who came to us towards the end of his career, where his career, by his own admission, wasn't in the best place. And I think he did say that while he didn't have any immediate thoughts about, finishing up before he came to us, it was something that he could have done, because until Celtic kind of gave him that opportunity to, to come and finish his career on a real high with us, he didn't have a huge amount of options. And this is a guy that, won his first championship, and I think Man City were first championship in many, many years back in 2012. Played under a tremendous manager with some absolutely phenomenal players, and what is, widely considered the best league in the world, personal biases aside. And when he came up, I think based on his more recent record, a lot of people had a few doubts about him. And again, a little bit like what Brendan Rodgers done this season. Look at what Joe Hart's done the last couple of seasons. He's had his detractors, and I think at times even I've criticised him, although I always thought we had a great goalkeeper there. I just couldn't see how we could have got anyone better at the time in terms of either profile or even on his performances. But this season, his last season, not just with us, but as a professional footballer, the performances, the points that he's saved us, and I know people say that's the expectation when you're a goalkeeper at Celtic. You're paid the big bucks to make the big saves in the big games, but it's so easy to say. It's not so easy to go out there and do it. And I think we need to give Big Joe credit for what he's done. But it just feels like winning the cup today, that's a perfect send off for the big man. I really, 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 truly hope we do it. I hope he goes on to have a fantastic future career in whatever capacity he chooses to do. But you see what this has meant to him. You see it when he gets interviewed after the title party. You see it when he's on the park with his kids and his family. You hear it in all his interviews. This has meant a huge amount to him. And I think as Celtic fans, we've got a reputation for doing that. I think we did it to an extent with Craig Gordon as well when he came in. A bad injury, and we take the players kind of into our hearts. There's a wee bit of hero worship, and sometimes it's a wee, it feels like you're losing a family member or a relative sometimes when they eventually leave for whatever reason. But for me, I just hope the big man has a great game today, gives us one last reminder of what we're going to lose, goes out in a high with all the credit and plaudits he gets, goes on, has a great career, having his family, and really wish him all the best. But then, by God, we've got a big job next season trying to replace not just a great player and a great professional, but in one of the most difficult and key positions in that team. And it's something we've had varying degrees of success with over the years. But that's going to be for me the big key move in the summer. Big challenge.
Huge. Absolutely huge. Hello from Thailand says, Alexander McDonald, where are you watching Acsom? Where are you watching the game today? I want today to show, says Daniel, we have our foot on their throat. See, this is a language, man. Don't take any prisoners, Daniel. That this time with the Champions League money, we are finally going to leave them in the dust. That is what football is about, is it not? I think so. Parkhead Boy, hit the like button, troops. Absolutely. Give us a big thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. As I say, the show that we're working on next week is going to be the most kind of polished content that we have on the show. A lot of thought and effort and everything else is going to go into it. And I'm hoping to bring all the big guests to that table as well. Cannot wait. Ian Roy is busy in the comments. Win today, invest in the summer, and we're off and running. Parkhead Boy, it's exactly 67 years since the 7-1. Honestly, right, I've got the programme there just out of reach. No, I'm not old enough to have attended that game, but I do have the programme right there. And I got it from the Skylark Bar, thanks to Lawrence Connolly. Quarterback Punk, yeah, absolutely. Let's add the 10 and 6s onto there as well. I don't know how many times Rangers won it, but I remember us winning it on one occasion. And it was a big deal back then because we never used to win anything. Tony Daverin, hail from steamy Louisiana. Looking to wrap this season up in style. Let's do it, boys. 3-0 Celtic. Now, there's another player I want to talk about before we get to the action. We're only 6 minutes away from kickoff. And it's James Forrest, right? Jamesy Forrest. I always remember growing up, Chris, there were obviously the tales, the folklore of Celtic and guys you'd never seen, and you could read up on them and watch the videos and everything else. And what you wanted, I think, as a football fan, same with music, you got any music and the Beatles, hence the name and everything else, right? You got into it, but they weren't really your band because, you didn't see them on the rise. You didn't see their career, their trajectory, you didn't go and see them live. So it was different, right? And what you want is you want your own heroes. Personally, I was the same in music as I was with football. I wanted my own band. I wanted to go and see my own band, not just hear about all these bands for the 60s. That's why bands like Oasis are important to me, right? Because I discovered them myself. I went and seen them myself, that kind of thing. Now, Jamesy Forrest, we've seen him as a young 17-year-old breaking through. We've seen him developing. We've seen his career almost hit a brick wall at one point. And then we've seen this resurgence and renaissance, as you speak about. Now, today of all days is the 25th of May. As you know, it's a pivotal day in the history of Celtic Football Club. It's the day we won the big cup, and that's why we can embroider that star above our crest. Now, there are two players at the absolute pinnacle of, you know, them being the most decorated Celts in the history of the football club. This is playing honours. This isn't an accumulation of playing and coaching honours. And the guy who's won the most is the one, the only Bobby Lennox, 25 trophies in total. Second to Bobby Lennox, as we sit here right now, Chris, are two men who are joint second. It's Billy McNeil, Caesar, and James Forrest. They've both won 23 honours. Now, I know we're counting trophies here, and I know that the big one, if you were cashing in your chips, would get you far more credit than a League Cup. Absolutely get it. Different eras. But that's James Forrest. And if James Forrest wins today and if Celtic win today, he's clear on number 2. He's the second most decorated Celt of all time. Some people still don't think he's a legend. He is. He's a living legend, Chris.
Yeah, look, that's some company to be in, isn't it? Bobby Lennox and Billy McNeil. You know, he probably can't believe it himself if he ever looks at that stand. He seems such a humble boy. I'm not entirely sure he would, but that, you imagine what people will make of that 25 years or 30 years from now. You know, when they're looking back at this, maybe slightly less cynical eyes than what a lot of us do at the moment, and they actually are looking back through a more romantic lens. Look, James Forrest is not at fault for how he is perceived in terms of his achievements, in terms of the era he had to play with. He had no part to play in that. James Forrest can only be born when he's born. He can only join the club when he joins, and he can only play and win and perform in matches that are in front of him. For me, and look, I've criticised James Forrest's performances over the years. There were at times where I thought he was stagnating, where he maybe wasn't moving from that. This is a boy that's going to break through to the point where actually he has broken through now and is now one of the real reliable veterans within the team. I think if you look over the course of his career, you look over this really successful period that we've had, this period of domination that we've had in the last X amount of years, James Forrest has been a huge part of that. Right, he has been a huge part of that. He wasn't a passenger for those title wins. He's contributed goals, he's contributed assists, he's been on the park for the 90 minutes during match winners. He's come on as a substitute and made impacts.
Scored in every season that he's played. 15
scored in every season.
Yeah,
stats sometimes, I know they're cold. They don't carry the romanticism. They don't necessarily always pass the eye test. But for me, there's no way you can look at James Forrest and not say he is anything other than a certified Celtic legend. He is absolutely up there in the right company. I appreciate nothing will ever top the Lisbon Lions. I didn't see it, but nothing will ever top it. But come on, let's give James Forrest the recognition. He's one of our own. He's came through. He's a one-club man. There aren't many of them about now. Give the boy some credit. And I can't believe that I'm at the age where I'm still calling James Forrest a boy. You know, that's how you know you're getting on a bit, right? Is that I can still call James Forrest a boy even at the point in his career he's at. But yeah, for me, an absolute legend. Well done. You deserve it. You deserve all the accolades that you've got coming. Absolutely.
Well, one thing you don't prepare yourself for as a football fan, Chris, and I'm looking at the teams entering the pitch and Jamesy Forrest getting a wee close up there. One thing you never think about is you'll actually see footballers' sons playing football. And that's something that I have experienced. I've watched the dads, I've watched the sons. What next? Am I going to see Ian Wright's grandson playing football for a team in England? Yeah. Probably, right? So obviously all the pyros, all the tifos, they're all there. We're seeing that both sets of teams on the park. They're doing their all working down the list. They're giving the big handshakes and all that kind of stuff. All the kids, the mascots, everybody's excited. It's a phenomenal setting for a game like this. It's Hampden Park, and of course, Brendan Rodgers has got a tremendous record at Hampden. Doesn't get beat. He doesn't get beat here, and Celtic don't get beat on the 25th of May. If you're a traditionalist, if you're a historian, these are sometimes the kinds of things that you look at and say, that's an incredible record that it's been built up over a long period of time. And Celtic will be keen to keep that record intact today. Yes, there's going to be a lot of emotion. Of course there is. This is Celtic after all. But I think that Brendan Rodgers and this side have shown that we've got what it takes. If we turn up and we perform the way we can perform, we can win this game today. Regardless of what happens, Chris and I will be here at halftime and at full time. Go and enjoy the game. Have a couple of sherbets or a herbal tea or whatever is your poison, and enjoy the first half of football. And we will come back at halftime. All that's left for me to say thank you once again, Chris McElwain, for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.